and his door cracks open. I see a little bit of his face pop out, and I see a hand punch out, and then all of a sudden it's just muzzle flashes. So I see a number of muzzle flashes in front of me. I return fire. My first round goes into his rear driver's side door. Round stops in the door frame there. Gets stuck. I just missed his face by a few inches. He comes down on 2 feet, squares up with me, starts dumping more rounds on me. I throw 2 more rounds back at him. Both of them strike him center mass. One goes straight through, the other one lodges in his spine. Guy doesn't even feel it. Doesn't feel a thing. He just keeps pumping rounds.
This episode brought to you by Max Belts. Guys, are you looking for a perfect accessory to wear every single day for every single scenario? Well, you've come to the right place. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, then you've come to the right place. Max Belts. They're handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. And if you're looking for a belt that's tough enough for your active lifestyle and help support those who've given so much to our country, look no further than Max Belts. It's the toughest belt on the planet. It's a perfect solution for casual or dress wear and ideal for utility and firearm carry. It's the highest caliber of American craftsmanship, and it also positively impacts our military charity partners. Once again, Max Belts, you can't go wrong with them. I wear them every day. They're the toughest belt on earth. And you can find all of this and so much more at maxbelts.com. Hey guys, welcome back to the DTD podcast. On December 10th, 2020, Officer TJ Webb of the Milford Police Department found his life forever altered while serving on an arrest warrant with the U.S. Marshals Violent Fugitive Task Force. What began as another day of duty quickly turned into a battle for survival when a suspect opened fire, striking TJ 6 times. Left with life-threatening injuries, doctors gave him grim odds, predicated on a long and uncertain recovery that could take up to 2 years. But TJ defied those expectations, confronting his physical limitations with the same determination that had seen him through nearly 2 decades of service. This week in the studio, please welcome TJ Webb. What's going on, my friend?
Oh, DJ, thanks for having me, man. That was a great intro for me. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, you deserve everything that I read about you. So let's talk about this book. Let's talk about this, man. Just one more. There's so much that people can learn from this because I feel, a lot of people write biographies or they write autobiographies or however you want to say it, and they have the story of themselves, but this is not only the story of yourself. This is talking about everyone around you and what people are really able to accomplish if they put their mind to it. So yes, it's a story of you, but I think that's only a basis for what other people can learn from the book. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that was my main thing with writing, man. I just wanted to find a way to give back to people, give them some hope, something they can look to if they have something going in their life, a setback, a critical incident, something that there's always a way to get through it. You just have to find it,
Well, I want to talk about your career because it's the strangest career that I've seen in police. And the reason I say it's the strangest is because I've never heard of someone starting as a summer cop and kind of graduating on to not only the police department, but K-9, narcotics, SWAT, U.S. Marshals Task Force. But you pretty much started out as Paul Blart down there. You describe it as you don't really have arrest power, you don't really have police power, but you definitely got that in your blood there. So can we talk about how you started as kind of a summer cop?
Yeah, so through high school, I had no idea really what I wanted to do with myself. I knew I didn't want to do the typical blue-collar job that I've seen my dad do, construction, working on cars, paving driveways, simply because I saw how hard that man worked day in and day out. And I was like, I do not want to have to work that hard my whole life, man. It's an honest living, but it's brutal work. And I was not looking forward to doing that. So the only thing I really had interest in was police work. simply because we had some family friends that were on the job. So I saw that a lot growing up. And then so my senior year of high school and the year after, I live at like a beach community. So they have like summer programs for, 18 and up, where you can do like a summer officer program. And you have arrest powers for like misdemeanors, but it's more like, it's nothing serious. It's more like, drunken publics and disorderlies and stuff like that. So I took a job doing that. It's for the summer, like Labor Day or Memorial Day to Labor Day, learning a little bit about the job. I did that for a few years and eventually went to the police academy with that agency to start.
I do want to talk about something else, though, about kind of you being in high school and stuff. Now, you describe yourself as a good athlete, a good son, horrible student. Do you think that horrible student, because I know you talk about in the book about college and it's not for everybody. And I want to know kind of with that horrible student thing, did you think that there wasn't anything else to do, or were you focused on this because that's what you felt your calling was to do? Does that make any sense? Because I have a lot of guys come on here and the military is kind of their way out of their life or out of where they're at right now. Did you feel it was ever that way with police, or did you just think that's the thing for me to do?
I never felt like I had a calling for it. It was literally the only thing that I had any sort of interest in. So I thought I'd give it a whirl. Later on, once I got into it, I felt like it was a calling because I just kind of fell into it and fell in love with it really quick. And then I had a great career. So I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. Not too long after I started, but I would say going back to the early days in high school, I didn't feel like it was like a calling where it was like, this is what I'm meant to do now.
And I don't see a lot of people in high school say that they want to be that. And I think you would agree that even less these days say that they want to be a cop. Then just because you're kind of in that phase of, you don't really know if you want to be the authoritarian, if you want to be the one that enforces the rules and things like that. So I agree with you about not knowing, but I've always wondered, because you seem pretty set on it, starting so young, doing the summer cop job and then going to Dewey Beach and then to Camden, all in a goal to come back to Milford.
Right.
With that being your final goal was to come back to Milford, protect the place that you grew up. With this going to Dewey Beach and Camden, is it all short-term goals in your head? Because I know you talk about just one more, but I almost feel like that part of your career was just short-term steps because you knew where you wanted to end up and you would just do whatever it took to burn that time until you got back.
Yeah, pretty much. Dewey, I started there as a summer cop. They treated me well. They sent me to the academy. So, I spent 2 years there, trying to, give them some time, since they took care of me. And then I moved on. I tested with Milford, didn't get hired. Ended up moving on to Camden, just to get a little more experience, a little more, because Dewey, it's a summer town. So it's a great town, a lot of cool stuff going on. It's busy as all it could be in the summertime, but in the wintertime, it's a desert town, man. There's not much going on. So I wanted to get more experience. So I knew in order to keep things moving and progressing in that job, I had to do something. So I took the next step, which was Camden, a little bit bigger of an agency, but, regular police work, throughout the year. So that's what I did.
So when you go to the academy, I know when everyone's in the academy, they always talk about what they want to do or what they want to be. And it ends up usually being something different than they say in the academy. What were your aspirations while you were there? Because every teacher that comes into the academy always asks, what do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want to do with your career? What was it that you had your sights set on?
I always wanted to be a canine. I always wanted to be a canine officer. That was like the only thing I knew I wanted to do for sure. So that was the first thing I really set out to do when I got out. Because I actually got out and I had a dog in Dewey for a short period of time, just for narcotics. And then she ended up retiring because I ended up taking her to Camden with me. She did a year with me in Camden, and then they cut the program, so she was gone. So it was a short-lived stint until I got to Milford, and then I got a regular canine, patrol and narcotics dog.
All right. I got to ask you a question because you brought it up. And it's interesting that you say it's so soon into this. You said the Dewey Beach took care of you. They're the ones that sent you to the academy, so you felt that you owed them something.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but through the book, when we talk about Milford, and how they took care of you when everything happened. Do you feel like you always gave when you knew you had to, and you were kind of left alone during this whole incident from the people that kind of, I wouldn't say owed you, because they don't owe you, but should have been the ones to take care of you?
Yeah, I will say, well, the men and women of my agency were great. You know, the officers below the administration level, they were all great. They were fantastic. The administrative level was a disaster. I had one lieutenant who ended up becoming captain about a year into my recovery, who really stepped up to do a lot for me, which was unexpected because he and I really never saw eye to eye on anything throughout my career. So for him to step up and take a leader role during that was huge and unexpected. Outside of that, didn't have a whole lot of support over there, especially from the chief at the time. I think it was just something that hadn't happened in our agency. We'd have had officer-involved shootings, but we never had an officer actually hit. So I think they weren't really prepared on how to handle that. And then at the time, also, the chief that we had was just not, how should I say, emotionally attached to anything, I guess you could say. Just no emotional intelligence. I'll put it to you that way. I don't know how to put it there.
No, I get it. But so let's talk about you as an officer. When you finally get to Milford, and the way I did the math, I'm figuring you did about a total of 16 years with Milford.
Yeah, around there.
Okay. So 16 years. When you come there, what kind of guy are you? Because you've only worked small jobs. You wanted to keep moving to larger departments so that you could work bigger and bigger crimes, learn how to be a cop better. Describe you as you come to Milford.
Yeah, I was still young. I mean, I was 25, I guess, around there. So I was still pretty young, and I was young in police work, and I was, excited to get into stuff. And it was rough going there in the beginning because it was my hometown. So most of the officers there knew me from the time I was a young kid. So it was rough starting out. I feel like a lot of them probably didn't think I belonged there, maybe, I felt like. So I feel like there was a lot of, I don't want to say hazing, but it was just a lot of like, this kid's not going to make it. He doesn't belong here kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So can we talk about that? Was it something of your past that made them think that, since you knew them from back in the day or anything? Or what was it that put kind of a target on you? Because you definitely paid your time in. You're talking the years as a seasonal cop, and then 2 years at Dewey, a year and a half at the other one. So you'd put in your time. So what do you think it was?
I don't know. I think it was just knowing the guys there. I think it was just a lot of ego. I don't know, man. It's something I never really figured out. It took me a while to get hired there, and then when I did get hired, it was kind of like, yeah, and it was just, and I thought it was just rough starting out, man. There wasn't a lot of faith in me, I guess you could say. I mean, and I was kind of a hothead then in my early 20s. I was probably a little hard to manage because I like to do my thing, do it my way. So, I mean, that didn't play well in my favor either. So it wasn't 100% their fault either. I was kind of a jackass at that age. But I don't know what it was. I think it was just, I was young and coming on to there after trying so many times to get hired. I don't know. My dad worked for the city as well. In the street department. He was head of the street department at the time. And I think they were kind of like, maybe we shouldn't hire him because his dad works for the city too, kind of thing. I don't know. It was just a rough go around to start out. Couldn't really give you a solid answer on why. I never really figured it out. But it all worked out going forward.
Well, and that's the big conflict during the whole book that I'm reading. So you talk about, not really fitting in, or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
But then you go to canine, you go to narcotics, and we'll get into each one of those, but you kind of move around the department as, I wouldn't say as you please, but you move around, definitely progressing your career, learning more and more on the job.
Yeah.
Definitely getting to work with bigger agencies. that's the conflict that came up when I read this book and I was just trying to figure that out. Like, okay, they didn't know whether he should be there when this happened. The administration wasn't that great to him, but they continued to move him around. So can you go into that at all? Do you have any idea why that would have happened?
Well, whenever I put my mind out to do something, as you can tell from the book, I'm pretty sure like I'm going to get it done. And that's a mindset I always had, especially during my career. If there was something I wanted, like, getting K9 or getting on SWAT, I was going to go get it and I was going to make it happen. And I busted my ass out there on patrol every day to do the best I could to draw attention to myself, to say, hey, I'm here and I'm putting in the work. And if I want something, I'm going to go get it. So I think it came down to whether they liked me or not. They really couldn't say, we're not going to give you this position, because I earned it, I went out there and busted my ass every day for whatever it was I wanted to get. And I went out there and earned this spot. So I think it was just hard for them to say, we're not going to give this to you, when I was doing so well with it.
Well, so let's talk about some of those. Let's talk about, you want to go into narcotics? Because you kind of jump back and forth on narcotics. You were there, you were a one-man kind of thing, answering city council complaints and stuff like that. Then you went to K9. So do we want to go into narcotics first and just kind of explain? Because I think when you got there, according to the book, you didn't really, it wasn't what you expected. I think you expected a lot more than what was actually happening in narcotics.
Well, K9 was first.
Okay.
So I'll start with K9. So yeah, I was on patrol for a number of years, and then K9 spot came up. I put in for that, and that's a 6-month training for us. We had a 2-man K9, so we had 2 dogs, 1 for each rotation. And I had a rough go around starting out with K9. I didn't get the dog that I wanted. I didn't get to pick it. They picked it for me, and it was a German Shepherd. He got up to like 105 pounds at one point, I think. He was a monster, and I was scared to death of this dog. From the moment I laid eyes on him, I was just scared to death, man. And training was tough. I think we were like a week or 2 weeks in, and we just weren't meshing. Like, the dog wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, but I was blaming everything on the dog. You know what I mean? And the trainer that we had was rough, dude. I mean, he was a brutal trainer. No bullshit. This is the way it's going to be. Make it happen, or you're fucking out of here. And sure enough, towards the end of the first or second week, I want to say it's the second week, I just had a really bad day, and he let me have it. And he was like, get your shit, get your dog, get the fuck out of here. You're done. I don't want to see you back. So I drove home that day, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, he just kicked me out of K9 school. I can't call my supervisors and say, I just got kicked out of K9 school. Like, what? I've been working my ass off to get here. You know what I mean? Like, I've never failed at anything like that. So I got home to my wife, told my wife, and she's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm just going to not say anything. I'm going to drive back up in the morning and see what happens. And she's like, well, what if you go up there and he tells you to fucking leave? And I was like, well, now I'll call the bosses. But I went home, did that, relaxed, got up the next day, didn't say shit to anybody, drove back up there. It's like a fucking hour and a half drive up there. And I got up there like 06 or 5:30, something like that. And sure enough, he didn't say anything. We just continued on with training. Like nothing happened. And looking back, knowing how he was as a trainer, I think that was just kind of like a test. I think he was just testing me to see if I would actually quit because he told me you're done, or if I would actually come back and try and make it work. Because he never said anything about it. We just continued on, like nothing happened. And then I ended up figuring out, it wasn't the dog's fault anyway. It wasn't the dog's fault that we were failing. It was my fault because it's a dog. I had to figure out what I needed to do to get this dog to learn specific things and how to convey certain things in order for it to do what I wanted to do and what he's supposed to do. That's not the dog's fault. It's my fault. It wasn't the trainer's fault. It was my fault. So that was a big step. Looking back, I think that was a big step in my career just in that point, because like I said earlier in my career up to that point, I was kind of, I didn't blame stuff on people. I was just a hothead. You know what I mean? And it's like, this is the way we're going to do it. This is the way I do it. This is how I'm going to do it. And after that, I think it was a big growing point for me. I think I learned a lot during that canine school, and it really changed my mindset and my outlook going forward.
And so when you change that mindset, do you feel like you're understanding policing better at that point?
Yeah, I feel like I started understanding policing a little better because now I'm getting into more of like coming from patrol. I'm getting more into what I felt like was more like not investigations, but I'm paying a lot more attention now to what's going on, because now I have to pay attention, not just my surroundings. I need to pay attention to the dog and pick up on what the dog's feeling, what the dog's doing, how he's reacting to things. I got to be more in tune with what's going on out in the street with my traffic stops, what's going on down at the corner that I'm watching. I feel like it made me a better investigator going forward, because I was looking for opportunities to utilize the dog now,
Well, okay, so you have this dog, you're learning policing a little more, you're learning to pick up on those subtleties, and I think that comes a lot with the dog, of knowing those subtleties.
Right.
The thing that I'm wondering, though, is you do this, you see your career advancing, but when you look at it in that situation, there's only 2 canine guys. I know you wanted to do that for the rest of your career. Do you see really any advancement, or do you even care about advancement from there?
I didn't really care at that point. I was on SWAT at that point already. SWAT was the first thing I got on. So I had that going for me. That's a part-time position because we don't have a full-time team. I had the canine thing now. I really wanted to let the canine thing go. I was like, well, I'm going to have this dog for X amount of years to retire, and then hopefully I get a second dog, and then I can try canine out into the sunset, retire. Maybe I can get going our own training program here. I was looking at a number of things, but I wanted to stay in that realm of canine. Sure, I wasn't thinking about going back to the drug unit or Marshall's task force. No, that was even consideration for me at that point.
Do you remember that day when you talk about it in the canine training where he sends you home? Do you remember what happened that day, looking back on it? Because there's so many times in this book that I want to know what you think now that you're so far ahead, you're retired now, you have all this hindsight, you have maturity, you have wisdom now. Do you remember what it was that made that happen at the academy? Because I want to bring that forward to another question.
So when it happened, we were in a building doing drug work. So we had some drug hides out, and we were working on teaching the dog to go from like low to high, scanning, and getting his nose on where it needed to be on. And I just wasn't doing a good job at doing it. The dog was rushing, going very fast, and it was up to me to slow him down. And I wasn't doing that because, again, like I said earlier, it's a big fucking dog, and I was scared of him, and the dog knew I was scared of him. So that's where I was failing.
So as you move forward, though, and you learn, so we come back into the present, and as you've learned, this is how we have to respond to each other. This is how we have to act, the subtleties with each other. When you do that, how does your demeanor change with the dog working with it?
So it's more of just me just slowing my pace and building that confidence in me, and just not being scared of it. Just trying to figure out, like, hey, this is my partner. He's moving too fast. I need to slow it down, but he's not going to slow down and take his time unless I start slowing myself down, because the dog's going to read off of you. He's going to read off your demeanor and your actions, right? That's how they do it. So I had to start working on me before I could really start working on him, if that makes sense.
No, that was exactly the point I was getting to, because you've said on numerous times during this conversation already,
yeah,
you were a hothead, you did things your way, and you found out real quick you can't do things your way. Yes, you have to control the situation, but you have to do it in subtle measures.
Right.
So that's where I was kind of going with that I wanted to know if you actually realized that while that was happening.
Yeah, I did a little bit, but not to the level that I did as time went on. You know what I mean? Like, looking back, as I got older and matured, looking back, and I was like, that's what I did. I needed to slow down. And at the time I did. I was like, I knew I needed to slow down. So I did, but I wasn't looking at the big picture of it either, as far as like a maturity level.
Right. So as we move through your career, you get super close with this dog. You talk about it that he was one of the best partners you ever had. You loved him 24 hours a day. He was with you. Let's talk about what that does to you as a partner, because it's different than having other partners in law enforcement. Yes, you have a partner at work. Yes, you're very close with each other. You know your families, all of that information. This one is someone that's actually relying on you to make sure that they live. So can we talk about the mind state that goes into that?
Yeah. So, the dog lives with you. So it's with me at home all day. I take care of him all day. If I go away on vacation, I got to find somewhere for him to go, someone to take care of him. I got to make sure everything's taken care of when I go out to dinner. He's with me at work. I mean, it's not like having a pet where it's like, oh, we're going to leave for a few hours, or we're going to go away for the weekend and, grandma can watch the dog. It ain't like that, I'm with the dog more than I'm with anybody, including my family. There was times where we had snowstorms and I slept at the PD with the dog in the locker room for 2 days on the blanket. I mean, it's just, he's you, he's part of you, So unless you've done it, it's really hard to describe the level of love that you actually come to have for these animals. It's really quite remarkable. How you can actually feel about a dog. It's unbelievable, to be honest with you. Losing him later on was, at that time, probably the hardest thing I'd ever had to deal with.
And that's what I wanted to get to next, showing that, that comparison of a partner, which, of course, if you lost them, that's devastating to you. But when you lose a partner that lives with you, that relies on you, can we talk about July 4th, 2017?
Yeah, so I typically work nights full time, and they had just changed my schedule around recently, so where I was going to go back and forth and rotate days and nights. So we were on day work on July 4th. I got done at 7:00, 1900, and we were on the way home, and started getting sick in the back seat of my car. And I didn't really think too much of it because I was like, sometimes I just hack something up here and there, Then we get home, and usually when I get home, well, not usually, every time I get home, I open that back door up. He's just a rocket out of the back door right to his kennel because he wants food, he wants water, he wants to relax, And open that back door up, and he was just sitting there tanning, which was really odd. And he wouldn't come out. I had to help him out of the car, help him into the kennel, and then he was just very lethargic. He would sit up, he would lay down, sit up, lay down. He wouldn't eat anything, drink anything. And I thought, well, this isn't real good. So I called our emergency vet, and they're like, well, bring him in and we'll take a look at him. So I take him in there. They look him over and they're like, well, he's probably just dehydrated. Looks like he's probably dehydrated. We'll, get some fluids in him. We'll keep him overnight. We'll call you in the morning and I'll let you know how things are going. I was like, okay. So I didn't think too much of it. So go home, go to bed. And now it's probably, 9:00 or something. I remember about 2:30, I get a phone call from the vet saying they weren't sure what was wrong with him, but there's something going on and they're going to have to take him into surgery and open him up. And that's all I got. And they wanted to know if I needed to make any phone calls to get permission because it was going to be expensive. And I remember thinking, I don't give a shit what it costs. I'll pay for it myself if I have to. I'm not going to call and get permission. So I gave them the okay to do it. And then I remember I went back to bed. I told my wife, and then I just tried to go back to sleep, and I couldn't, obviously. And then I remember at like 3, I remember looking at my clock. It was 3:12. My phone rang again, and it was them. And they said they had taken him back in that surgery, opened him up, and he was just ate up with cancer everywhere, and we just never knew it. Never came up on anything. So I lost him in the blink of an eye in the middle of the night, and it was as if my whole world just got turned upside down. I mean, I just lost my best friend, my partner, a family member. And then you look at the other side of it, my whole job just changed, literally, like in the blink of an eye. So everything is totally changed now. you know. I didn't even know who to call. So I ended up calling the other canine guy that we had who was working and told him. And of course, he was in disbelief. So he ended up coming to pick me up and drove me to the vet to see him. And I remember just sitting in the room with him for a couple hours, just two of us, and just crying my eyes out with him for a couple hours on the bed there. And that was a tough time, man. That was 2017. That was a really rough year for me in law enforcement. It was just, I had a lot of death in my life that year. Hank died. Not too long before that, my shift partner committed suicide. We had another officer in the state that was killed about a month before that. It was just a really bad year. I dealt with some other deaths at work on some complaints, and things were just boiling over for me at that point. And I remember a couple of days went by after Hank died, my dog, and there was no communication from my administration about anything. I didn't know when I was supposed to go back to work, what schedule I was working, if I was going to get another dog. There was nothing. So this was on a Wednesday into Thursday, and I was working the weekend. So I remember asking if I could have the weekend off, and they didn't want to give me the time off. So the sergeant I worked for at the time, who was awesome, he's actually a lieutenant now, he got promoted, which is really awesome because these guys love him, he's great. And he was off that weekend. He said, look, man, like, you go ahead and take off. I'm not worried about it. Do what you got to do. Take the whole weekend. I said, well, I'll take off Friday and Saturday, and I'll come back in on Sunday. The way you don't have to worry about it. So I came back in on Sunday, worked. And then I requested a meeting with the chief for Monday. And I go in, had the meeting with the chief. I remember walking in his office, and he was like, what do you want? First thing I asked him, I said, what do you want? And I need some direction. Like, what are we doing? Am I getting another dog, or, what's the deal here? And it was just, it turned out being an absolute shit show with this guy. Man, I mean, he ended up blaming me for the dog's death, basically. I remember him, I don't think I put this part in the book, but I remember him asking me what it was that I had done to the dog and shit. It was just a terrible experience. I ended up losing my mind on the guy in the office, to the point where the old me started to come back, and I pretty much told the chief off. And I should have probably been fired, like, on the spot, looking back. He probably could have and should have just fired me, because I was wrong for doing it, because he is the chief, regardless of how I feel about it. So I lost my mind on him in there, and he ended up taking a step back and realizing, like, oh shit, this guy's probably might be at a little bit of a breaking point. And kind of calmed down for a second, gave me a break, ended up giving me a couple days, and then that's where the drug and stuff came into play.
Well, I got to go back to that for just a minute, because we kind of glazed over it really quickly, but you had the loss of a friend to suicide. You had your canine partner die. The topic that I kept seeing pop up in the book was unexpected. Everything was unexpected. Now, can you plan for everything? Can you get around everything? Yeah, you can, but a lot of this stuff seemed completely unexpected to you in life. And I want to talk where you're at, because you said you kind of lost it. You're at a boiling point, but I want to talk mentally where you're at. You see a friend commit suicide, you lose your partner. This is the job that you think you're going to do until you, as you say, ride off into the sunset. Are you changing that idea at all at this point? Because you're seeing that just because you pour syrup on shit, don't make it pancakes around there.
Yeah, I was done. My wife and I actually talked about it, like, what I wanted to do. I was miserable, man. Like, I was just truly fucking miserable. I hated everything. I hated everything. And I was just kind of at a loss of what I wanted to do, because this is all I had ever done, and all I really knew how to do, and everything was just going wrong. And luckily, they offered me the drug union spot. They saw that the road everything was taking a toll on me. they did offer me a spot with going back to the road. They offered me to go back as an assistant shift commander. And I didn't want anything to do with it. Told them I was done with the road. I needed a break. And that's when they said, well, we have the drug union spot open. If you want it, we'll give it to you. So I took a day to think about it and talked it over with my wife. And I took that and I thought, well, maybe this will be a break for me. I'll get off the road, kind of get on like a regular schedule so I could be home with the family on, most nights and weekends and see how things go for a while and see if they get better. And it did. It got better over time, sure.
Okay, but let's talk about something specifically, because this came up when I was reading the book. And I really wanted to ask you, do you think that they gave you that narcotics position because it's one person, they couldn't hire two, they were giving you cherry-picked complaints that were coming in, mostly city council, just squeaky wheel, as you call it, complaints. Do you think that that was given to you just to keep you from kind of complaining, keep you quiet, get you kind of back into the fold with everyone else? Because you're on the outside right now. Or do you really think that your department at that time was thinking, we want this guy to succeed, we want him to stay because we think he is someone that we need to have around? Which do you think it was, or do you think it was a combination of both?
I think it could have been a combination of the both. I think it probably leans more to like, let's give him a break because he obviously needs it, but let's just put him over here where he'll be kind of out of the way and, maybe we can just kind of control him a little bit more maybe, but it didn't end up being that way. I ended up being more busy in the drug unit than I was with K9. Because at that point, I had so much going on in my mind personally that I just wanted to stay busy. And I came out of the gates in the drug unit like a madman with all kinds of search warrants. I mean, it got to the point where like my chief wouldn't even sign off on search warrants because I was doing so many of them. And that's where I came into like, okay, now we're going to do like cherry picking complaints that come in like city council and a bunch of nonsense. And that's when I started getting like really kind of tired with the drug unit and started looking at the Marshals Task Force.
Now, do you think you realized at that time, or do you think, once again, we're looking back with hindsight, where they're just kind of putting you there so they could kind of keep control over you? You'd given a lot to the department already. You'd worked very hard for the department. How does that make you feel as a person and as an officer when you look back on it? Or maybe you knew it then, of they're just kind of, man, just get this guy to shut up and kind of get him out of the way for a minute.
Yeah, I think it was, I think it was kind of a way, let's just get this guy out of the way for a little bit, but it didn't bother me because I know me. Like, it didn't matter where they put me with me. I wasn't going to go anywhere, be quiet. I don't know if they realized that or not. But I mean, it's starting out in the drug unit, they were supportive of whatever I wanted to do. They were really supportive of like, search warrants and things like that. But after a while, it just started dying down, and it was more like things started becoming more like, okay, we're not going to do this one, or let's find a different way to do that. We don't want to use the SWAT team for this. And then it became more of like the dog and pony show. Okay, the city council has to clean over here or over there, or citizens calling about this. And that's when it started becoming really annoying to me.
So, as always, what do you do to get away from that? Because I think it's pretty funny that you moved yourself into a position where you got even bigger cases.
Yeah. So our CI unit at the time, we was dealing with a case. We had a lot of outstanding fugitives, and we just didn't have the manpower to go clean that up all the time. And we were working my CI guys were working a case one time. I can't remember what the case was, but they brought me in to help out with surveillance on it, and they were using the Marshals Task Force, which I wasn't really familiar with at the time because you just didn't see much of them. So we had a meeting with them, and I met a bunch of the guys and saw what they did, and I was like, this is a pretty badass unit. So I talked to the guys about it, and they're like, oh yeah, we're always trying to get guys on the task force, whatever, da-da-da-da. So I just went to my admin and was like, hey, CI's dealing with all these warrants for violent felons, and we're not getting them cleaned up. So I did a whole thing on I put a whole presentation together for the administration with all of our violent fugitives that were wanted, what they were wanted for. I got all the information from the Marshal Service, the pros and cons of it, and did a whole thing for them. And they're like, okay, well, we'll put you on the task force, but you still have to do drug work. And I was like, the rate I'm doing drug work right now, sure, why not? I'll do both. So that's what I ended up doing. I'm doing both at the same time.
Well, and let's be honest, they kind of go hand in hand with each other.
They went hand in hand, and it worked out for me because I was able to stay busy with the drugs again if I wanted to, because now I had manpower outside of my own agency that could help me do it.
Well, and you also have a network of people that will tell you where these fugitives are because, like I said, they go hand in hand with each other.
Yeah. I mean, it worked. It ended up being perfect looking back on it because I was able to have the best of both worlds, which was really rare. So,
well, when you move over to the Marshals Task Force, you get, your credentials, you TFO and everything. I want to ask you what you think it was like to truly, truly be part of a team for the first time in your career.
Yeah, so I worked with a lot of awesome guys at my agency. That I got a lot of guys that I'm still friends with and I love them. And they were some of the greatest guys I've ever worked with. But when I went to the Marshal Service as a TFO, that was like a whole nother level, man. You're with the same tight-knit group of guys every day, chasing the worst of the worst, and putting your lives in each other's hands every second you're out there. And all the guys I worked with there, without a doubt, were 100% the best guys I had ever had a chance to work with throughout my entire career. And it was just a different level, man. The guys were on that unit because they wanted to be on that unit because they were highly proactive guys. They were there for a reason. They wanted to be trained. They wanted to go out and do the job, and they wanted to do it the best of their ability. And it wasn't something I was used to being around all the time, being on a job, like you have great guys you work with, but that's all those guys, like they're just there. Yeah, I mean, every agency has that, right? There's guys and girls who are just there. They're just there to do what they got to do and get through the day. But when I went to the task force, it wasn't like that. Everyone was there, and they were there on a mission. And that was something that I was really attracted to because that's how I tried to live my life. That's how I tried to do my job.
The question to me would be, though, that's what you were attracted to. That's what you wanted to do. Do you think you were ready for that yet? Because throughout your whole career, yes, you'd been proactive. Yes, you'd been busy, but these guys were on another level. Do you think you were up to that task in the beginning, or you had to grow into that?
I was a little nervous going to it just because I didn't really know any of the guys yet. So I was kind of nervous to see how things operated and whatnot. But I fell into it really quick and got comfortable really quick. And that's partly because the guys that I was working with were all just super fucking cool, man. Like they just, they took me right in and we just fell into a flow with it. So I never really had any problems with it.
Was there a pecking order, though? Because I never really could decipher one when you talk about the group in the book. Yeah. I never really could decipher a pecking order there.
No, we didn't really have one. I would say, well, Josh, who is my teammate that ended up driving me to the hospital, he was kind of like if somebody was going to be in charge on scene, if we didn't have a marshal there with us, he was designated to be like, in charge on scene. But outside of that, like, nah, we were all kind of on the same level. We treat each other as we were on the same level. We read each other really well, and we never had any problems with it that way.
Well, the last year stats that you had 138 violent felons, 26 of those were homicide suspects, which kind of leads into the incident that happened with you.
Yeah.
With having so many in such a small area, how are you picking what you want to do? Because you've got bad guys, and they're all bad guys, and with 26 homicide suspects, how are you guys picking? Because I'm wondering how you got to this guy in December.
Well, the way we usually did our cases, like, we kept up on surveillance on all of our cases, as much as we could. And then as far as the pecking order for the cases we worked, it was kind of like, everyone had their own caseload, and you had the hierarchy in your caseload of what's going to have the highest priority, right? And then we kind of took down, like, okay, what's in our 4-man team, what's the highest priority? Well, out of these 4 cases, this one's the highest priority. That's kind of how we did it, kind of pecked at it that way.
And so how do you get to this guy?
So this guy actually wasn't one of our cases. He was wanted out of PA, and PA called down that night and was like, hey, we think we located this guy at this hotel, however they located him, because they weren't down here. And we want to come down in the morning and meet up with your team to see if we can go and apprehend him. So we were just kind of initially we were just going to be like assisting pretty much. But we ended up doing the operation that night, and it was going to be I was going to be in charge of the case, because it was in my area. So Pennsylvania, they weren't even down for it that night. We ended up jumping ahead early and doing it that night instead of the next one.
And I'm glad you answered it that way, because that's exactly where I wanted to go with this. Gotta ask you the question, do you believe everything happens for a reason?
Yes, I do. I believe things happen for a reason, but I feel like God lays out paths for us, and what path you take is up to you, if that makes sense.
It does, but the reason I asked that question, does everything happen for a reason? Because you had not only one chance by PA saying they'll be down tomorrow, but 2 chances. You were supposed to be at dinner and drinks with your father-in-law and a friend that night.
Yeah.
But you guys get the idea, hey, this guy's going to be going. He's moved out of he's left the hotel. He's gone somewhere. He's coming back. So you have 2 chances to avoid this entire situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I asked, do you think everything happens for a reason? Because throughout the book, you've even said it tonight, you make things happen that you want to happen, how you want them to happen.
Yeah.
Do you think that this incident was forced, or do you think that you played it the exact way that it was supposed to?
I think I played the exact way it was supposed to. I mean, I played that card that night like I played any other card, any other night on any other case. We were a very high-driven team, and if a case came up, we worked the case. It didn't matter if it was a Tuesday at noon or a Saturday at 3 a.m. that something came up. We went and did the job, and that's what happened that night. Things played out a certain way, and we ran with it.
And that's the reason I asked that. Not to say that you did it wrong. What I wanted to point out there was I asked you if it played out the exact way you thought it should, because even in that talk of that night, you thought, okay, we can do this. We can let him in the room. We can take him in the parking lot. We can do this. And you started putting things together like, well, if he makes it to the room, there could be a shootout. We could, there was a bunch of different factors going into it.
Right.
So I almost wonder if that was part of the overall plan was, if Pennsylvania comes down, this guy has time to embed, this guy has time to make plans, whatever, possibility of counter surveillance on you. There's so many things that could happen. When it goes down that night, I just got to know what you guys are thinking. Are you trying to just get this done and get it the way that it needs to be? Or are you thinking that if we take more time, it could end up even worse than it ended up that night?
Yeah, I mean, the initial thought was I want to get it done, because the more time that goes by, the more things can go wrong. That was the initial. That's why we did it, because if my thought was, if we're waiting until the morning, yeah, he could leave in the middle of the night, or a random patrol guy could stop him, not knowing what he was dealing with, and now we're looking at that. We're looking at a dead cop on the side of the highway. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to let that happen, knowing that I could have done something to prevent that. And when we have a job to do, our job is to locate violent fugitives and apprehend them. Well, we located the guy, so let's go fucking get him. Why are we waiting until tomorrow? And the other guys on my team felt the same way. We ran it through the supervisor. He agreed. Called Pennsylvania. They're like, hey, you guys want to go do it tonight? Have at it. Let us know how you do. So we ran with it.
Which is amazing to me. And that's what the big crux of the story was with me, was I wondered what was your thought process through it, because Like I said, there were 2 opportunities to not even be out on this surveillance tonight. You had one guy that was just getting done extraditing another fugitive that was on his way back to meet you guys. I mean, there were so many puzzle pieces that could have stopped this from happening.
Yeah.
It almost feels to me, as you read it in the book, as I talk to you, as we've talked before, that this was just meant to happen. The way that it went down was the way it was meant to be. And I almost think it was meant to be because you were meant for more than what you were doing at the time. And by that, I mean everything that comes after this.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it was meant to be. And my wife will tell you, I've always said that my whole career, I always felt like I was a shit magnet at work, man. Like I was just always in this, like every agency or every department has like that guy who's just falling into shit all the time. I was that guy. And my wife will tell you, I always had this feeling that sometime in my career, there was going to be something go down. Not necessarily me getting shot up, but there was going to be some sort of fucking incident I was involved in that was going to be life-changing. I just had this feeling. And sure as shit, it happened in my 17th year.
Well, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about that night. We're talking about December 10th, 2020. We've talked about it a little bit, but set up the story and let's go through the entire evening.
Yeah, so we went to work that day. It's like any other day, man. We typically started pretty early because we're just hard hitters, and then you usually worked into the night. And this day, I got home at a decent time. It was around 5:30. I got home, and we were getting dinner ready with the family. And then we get our group text with who's available for the morning for this op. From this guy wanting out of PA, he's wanting for attempted murder. And like I said before, Pennsylvania wanted to come down. So, of course, you're like, oh, yeah, we're available. So I'm like, okay, what hotel is it? So, like, give me the hotel. And I'm like, well, that's 10 minutes from my house from where I was staying at the time. And I was like, well, and I'm the closest one. Everyone else is a good hour plus, right? So I was like, well, give me the vehicle description. I'll run out to the hotel. I'll see if I can get eyes on the vehicle. That way we have some sort of confirmation that there's something there. So that's what I do. I get the vehicle info to my wife, like, yeah, I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to run out, check on this vehicle. And she's like, all right, no shocker there. So I head out and go to the parking lot. Sure enough, in the front row, there it is. Car's sitting there, Pennsylvania tags. I take up a parking spot, call my supervisor, like, hey, man, car's here. Tag matches, like, we're good to go for the morning. He's like, all right, sounds good. And as I'm on the phone with him, suspect walks out, and it's just as the intel had, it was him, girlfriend, and her 2 small kids.
Now, how small are we talking?
Man, I think probably the 2 of them were probably in the ranges of 2 to 5.
Okay.
So they let open the car and they leave. I let them clear the parking lot, and I sit there a while before I leave. And I'm not worried about them bugging out and skipping town. There's no bags, had no luggage. It's dinner time, so they're probably going out to grab a bite to eat and come back, right? So I let them roll, and then I go back home to my family and continue on with getting dinner and shit ready. And it's just not sitting well with me. Like I said before, we know where this guy is now. He could leave. He could get stopped by a random patrol guy. Something bad can happen there. A number of things could play out. And we signed up to do this job because we wanted to locate fugitives and apprehend them. So there's no need to wait till the morning. So I talked it over with my guys. They all agree. Supervisor agrees. Pennsylvania's like, hey, you guys want to go get him? Go get him. So tell my wife, like, hey, I'm going to go get this guy now. I can't wait till tomorrow. Like, I don't want to wait. I'm going to get this done with. She's like, all right, well, I'll save you a plate. All right. So I head back out to the hotel again. I get picked up the same parking spot. He's not back yet. So now it's me, my partner Josh, and my partner George. Mike, who was the 4th guy of our team, he was the one en route after he was doing an expedition, flying back from Atlanta. He was about 45 minutes out at this time. We have a number of other guys coming from the north end of the state, which is a little over an hour away. We have guys coming from the marshal's office in Salisbury, Maryland, which is about 45 minutes away. We do a lot of work with those guys. So Now we're in the parking lot. I'm on the east side of the building. George is on the north. Josh is on the south. And now we got to come up with a plan like, hey, if this guy comes back before the rest of the team gets here, what are we going to do? Are we going to take him in the parking lot with the three of us? Are we going to let him get into the hotel and wait till everybody else gets here? Or how are we going to play this out? And so we started weighing out the pros and cons. And if we let him get to that hotel room and wait and go make contact at the hotel room with the rest of the team, we're looking at a number of problems. We're looking at a hostage situation. We're looking at murder-suicide. We're looking at a gunfight, a threshold of the doorway where we can't return fire now because there's innocent people. We're looking at taking fire from within the room, and now that guy's rounds are going to be flying into everybody else's rooms where there's other innocent people. So it's a disaster situation. The other option is we take him in the parking lot at his vehicle, yet her and the kids will be in the car. Yet there's only going to be three of us, which is not ideal. But we're in a parking lot in December of a hotel where there's not many people around. It's about 7:45 at night now. There's not much going on. It feels a little safer. And a lot of questions I get from people all the time. Well, how come you did it with the kids there? Well, you're never not going to have the kids there. He's always going to have the kids and the girlfriend with him. That's why he has them. There's no way around that. It's just part of the job. And you have to plan for it and do it as safe as you can. And this is what we came up with. So, sure enough, bad guy comes in the parking lot before everybody gets there. He comes in from behind me, does a lap around the building, doing counter surveillance. Comes in around the north side, passes George, and pulls into the same spot that he was in before. The only difference is now, next to him on his driver's side, there's another vehicle parked there, which would block Josh from coming in and pinning that door on the takeoff. So the plan is George is going to come in from the passenger side to block that side. I'm going to come in from the rear, and Josh will come in from the driver's side. So we all agreed this is the best opportunity. This is the safest way to do it. So we end up giving the command to execute. So we move in. George comes in from the passenger side. I come in from the rear, and Josh comes in from the driver's side. But like I said, he couldn't get too far up because of that one unrelated vehicle parked there next to him. So when I came in my vehicle, ideally you want to come in straight behind, bumper to bumper, and get like a positive contact to block his vehicle. I came in based off of where I was parked at, I had to come in at an angle. And the angle was to a point where when I opened my driver's side door up, I'm pretty much looking down the side of his driver's side of the vehicle. So when I step out of my vehicle, I'm literally about 6 feet to his door. And it's like a fatal funnel. It's like a hallway. There's his car and the car next to him. It's just like a path right there. So I open my door up. I step out. I have my gun up already because I know what we're dealing with. And his door cracks open. I see a little bit of his face pop out. And then I see a hand punch out. And then all of a sudden it's just muzzle flashes. So I see a number of muzzle flashes in front of me. I return fire. My first round goes into his rear driver's side door. Round stops in the door frame there. Gets stuck. I just missed his face by a few inches. He comes out on 2 feet, squares up with me, starts dumping more rounds on me. I throw 2 more rounds back at him. Both of them strike him center mass. One goes straight through. The other one lodges in his spine. Guy doesn't even feel it. Doesn't feel a thing. He just keeps pumping rounds. So I took a number of rounds. I don't know how many he fired at me. I took 6 rounds. I took one in my left hand. I took one through and through my left shoulder. I took 2 in my right arm. I took one that was a ricochet off my plate carrier. Ended up landing in my face, stuck in my chin. And then I took one to my right femur just below my hip bone. Crushed, totally just obliterated my femur. that round dropped me at the back of his car, at the back quarter panel. The round in my hand caused me to drop my firearm, which rolled underneath of his car and literally stuck right behind his tire. And then when I fell, I ended up landing on both my hands with all my gear and crushed them. So now my left hand's broke because I got a bullet through it. My right hand broke because I just crushed it with all my gear. So I'm on the ground now and can't reach my gun because my hands don't work. And I can't see anything because my vision's blocked from the rear of his vehicle. But I can still hear gunfire going on. And I don't know if it's being directed at me, it's being directed at Josh and George, if they're engaged back with him. No idea what's going on at this point. So I start getting, these a million things going through my head at the time. And the obvious is life or death. I'm thinking, like, is this it? This guy's going to take 2 or 3 steps and he's going to plug one in my head. But the other thing I'm thinking about my family. I'm thinking about my wife. I'm thinking about my son. And if I'm ever going to see him again. And when I'm laying there, everything just kind of goes black. And I can see the face of my wife. I can see the face of my son. And it's like they're just sitting there. They're smiling. And they're like waving at me. Like, it's time to come home. Like, you need to come home. You need dinner with us. And it was at that point I started hearing this voice in my head. And it was a voice that was, I think we all have that voice, like a voice in our heads, a voice of negativity, that voice that tells us, like, you're not good enough, or you can't do that, you can't do this, it's too hard. I used to think it was a voice like that, like a voice of negativity, like put me down, and it was just screaming at me, and it was saying, you failed. You fucking failed, and they're going to pay for it. And that really haunted me to jump forward. That really, that voice really haunted me for a long time, man. Failure. But in that moment, as hard as it was to hear that voice, it was really part of the reason that I survived, because when I heard that and I saw my family, it was the voice that really convinced me, like, you need to get fucking moving. Like, you're not going to see them again, and you are going to fail if you don't fucking do something here. And so I started pulling with my elbows and pushing with my left leg, and I just started jamming my body underneath of the suspect's vehicle in the rear. And the goal was to protect as many vitals as I could. Because, like I said, he's going to take 2 or 3 steps and he was just going to finish me. So my hope was, if I can get underneath his car far enough and he does come back here, hopefully he just maybe pumps my legs up with some rounds and I don't bleed out if I'm not bleeding out already. So that's what I did. I just started jamming my body under there. And during that time period, I later, I didn't know at the time, obviously, because I couldn't see anything, but George ended up taking a shot at him through the car, the front windows. The girlfriend in the front seat was down on the floorboard, and Josh had a shot through the 2 front windows. So he took it and ended up landing around on the guy on his side, which caused him to take off running. He ran past me as I was underneath the vehicle. Then as he ran past me, he turned to his right, started cranking rounds off at Josh, and then he made it about 75 yards to the parking lot. A gunfight with Josh and George for about 75 yards until he went down in the parking lot. And at that point, it's still just 3 of us. And now we're in this parking lot of this hotel, and people are coming out of the hotel screaming at us, you just murdered this guy, you killed him, he didn't do anything, blah, 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 blah. And Josh and George got to make a decision, and a quick one, like, what are they going to do here? And they made the right decision. Josh was like, they didn't have to communicate. I already knew. Josh just looked, George said, you good? And George was like, yeah, I'm good. Go do it. And Josh came back to me, dragged me out from underneath the car, threw on a tourniquet, picked me up, threw me in the back of his car, and we were off to the hospital. And then George stayed with the body and kept cover on him. He was already dead, but he kept cover on him until help came, which was about less than a minute after we came out of the parking lot. Other units started arriving on scene. Can we get into the transport?
I do. I want to ask a couple things about the incident, though, before we get into transport, because that dark humor comes out of you on the transport. So I want to stick to the actual involved shooting.
Yeah.
When all this is happening and that voice is going off in your head and saying you failed, is there any point at that time that you think to yourself, because I know there was a lot of negativity going on there, that you thought, I didn't do this right, I should have done this a different way? I know that you said that you failed and stuff, but I want to know if you thought to yourself, I should have done this another way.
In that moment, no. I did briefly, jumping forward, like during my my stint in the hospital. But I worked through it real quick. I'm pretty good about working through things, not letting it fester, and coming to the realization of things. And that's what I did with the thought of it.
And so as you're laying there and you're thinking about everything, I think that people, when they hear the story, they kind of lose track of time, because it feels like it's 10, 15, 20 minutes that you're thinking about all this.
Yeah.
I'd like you to describe how fast all this is happening, how fast these thoughts. And that's why I asked you if you thought, is there another way that I could do this? Because there's a lot of crazy thoughts that come into your head. So how fast is all this happening? I'm talking from beginning to end.
From the time the first shot rang out until the time I was out of the parking lot, it's probably somewhere between 40 and 50 seconds at most. At most, it was very fast. And then the time for he and I exchanging gunfire on each other, that was probably like 3 seconds.
It's amazing. Can we talk about where you get audio exclusion, vision, all of those kind of things, where you get your tunnel vision, you get the audio exclusion, where time slows down for you?
Yeah. So as soon as I got in the car and heard his first round, I barely heard it. It sounded like a little cap gun. Like it wasn't loud at all. That's the audio exclusion. And I remember thinking, sure, I was scared. Obviously, I'm being shot at. But I remember my brain processing it as like I was in training doing simunitions training. And my first thought was, oh, it's simunitions training. I do this all the time, shoot and move. And I remember returning fire and then moving to my right for cover. And then once I was on the ground, I was like, well, that's definitely not a simunitions round. So, but it was a little different than the
Yeah.
But the audio exclusion, man, that was strange. It was just really like eerie, quiet. And then once I was on the ground, it was quiet for a moment, and then it was like a war zone. And then once the gunfire was done, it got quiet again, because Josh and George were doing their thing with him, and then Josh was working his way back to me. It was a really, it's really odd how your mind processes things and something like that, you know? And it's
Okay, let's
environment.
100%. I want to fast forward a little bit too, as they're taking you to the hospital, because of course, like I said, there's a little dark humor that goes on there. But we've talked about this self-fulfilling prophecy your whole career, where you're like, something's going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah.
At this point, at any time, are you going, yeah, you fucking did it now. This is it. This is what I've been talking about the whole time. Or is that not even a thought in your mind?
No, I was thinking about that in the back seat on the way to the hospital. Like, well, this is it. This is what's going to happen. I remember thinking that in the back seat. Yeah, no one's ever asked me that, but yeah. In the back seat, I remember thinking to myself, it actually fucking happened. Yeah, because actually, as a team, we had a lot of close calls that year, and even like in the October to that moment, we had a couple really close calls, and we actually had a conversation one day where we actually talked about like all the shit we have gotten into, and we all agreed like something's going to happen at some point because we're into a lot of shit, and it's inevitable. Like it's a number of the game. It's going to happen, right? And sure as shit, it happened. And I remember being in the hospital and talking to him like, we were right. It happened. You know, it was only a matter of time.
You guys are good now. I took the number for it.
Yeah, right.
You guys are good.
Yeah. It was wild, man. It's crazy. I mean, when you're in a high risk unit like that, I mean, it's only a matter of time. You're doing that shit day in and day out. It's going to catch up with you at some point. You know?
Well, let's talk about the drive to the hospital, because it wasn't what, everyone, I think, from the outside would look into it and go, what the fuck are these guys doing? Why are they talking about this? Why are they talking like this? So let's talk about how you guys acted on the way and kind of what your thought process was. This episode is brought to you by Trident Coffee, the veteran-owned brand where every sip inspires you to live life full steam ahead. At Trident, they are more than just coffee. They are storytellers. It's crafted by veterans. Their instant cold brew is perfect for those who serve, those who have served, and anyone who values wellness. Featuring natural ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics, it's more than just a morning pick-me-up. It's your new wellness ritual. Enjoy it at home or on the go, wherever your day takes you. Trident Coffee isn't just about great-tasting coffee. It's about empowering you to be the healthiest version of yourself, because great veterans make great citizens. Try their instant cold brew coffee today and taste the freedom of wellness. Remember, when you choose Trident, you're not just choosing coffee. You're choosing a path of connection through health and wellness. Use promo code DTD15 for 15% off your order.
Yeah. So, we in our pre-op, we always go over like, our game plan, our operations plan. And we always have a designated medevac vehicle. Josh was that vehicle for this operation. All of us always program the nearest hospital on our phones, on all of our phones, so that when you get into a car, regardless of whose car you end up getting into, the cell phone's in there with the GPS on it. All you got to do is hit go. Next book, all that. So he gets me in the back of the car. We pull out of the parking lot. He makes a right-hand turn to go south on the highway. And of course, the cell phone rolls off of the phone holder and falls underneath the seat. You can't reach the fucking thing. So it's gone, right? So there goes his fucking GPS. He doesn't know where we're going because he lives an hour or so away north of here. Luckily, I'm conscious, alert, and breathing in the back seat still, and I'm with it. So as we're driving south on the highway, I'm on my back, and I remember looking up through the window, and I remember seeing billboards for like restaurants and shit that I know because I live 10 minutes from there. And I remember saying, dude, are you going south? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, you might want to turn around because the hospital is north. And I think you already went through like 3 intersections. And you're going to get turned around. I remember he whipped that car around so fast. And I remember when he closed the door, my right leg was the one that was shot. And I remember when he closed the door, like my foot was stuck in between like the seat and the door. So I remember like, I just like kind of moved like a snake back there because I couldn't move my leg anyway because the bone wasn't attached, it was shattered. But I remember it was just like stuck there, and I was just like, oh man, it was terrible. But anyway, so we get northbound, and now Josh is on. He's on the radio. He's got his phone ringing. He's trying to get some direction and shit. And I'm bleeding like crazy out of my leg. He did tourniquet me, and it slowed it down. But the gunshot wound was like just below my hip, so he could not get the tourniquet above the wound. It was
high enough.
Yeah, it was impossible. You couldn't get it above it. So he pretty much had it on the bullet hole, like on the wound itself. So I'm still bleeding pretty good. And I got blood coming out. I'm spitting blood everywhere on my face because I got a round sticking out of my chin. And Josh had just got this car. It was a Jeep Cherokee. It was all leather, blacked out. The Marshal Service had bought it and issued it to him. He only had it for like a month. It was like brand fucking new. This thing was beautiful. And I'm bleeding like a fucking pig back there. And I remember apologizing to him. And he's like, dude, you don't have to apologize. Like, it's all good. You're going to survive, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I knew, man, but I'm bleeding all over the place back here. And I know how much you love this fucking car, dude. Like, I'm so sorry. And I remember he actually let out a little bit of a chuckle. And I chuckled a little bit and screamed because my leg was on fire. And, but it just goes back to showing, like, one, the sense of humor that we have as cops, that dark sense of humor. And two, we were both with it enough still to keep that open line of communication, probably to help each other. One, I knew I had to keep talking myself to keep myself in it, but I also needed to talk to him to help him stay in it. And he knew that, vice versa. So we were both in shock, obviously, but we still had enough in our wits to keep that in mind and keep each other tight. And that was a really important role that we both played in that situation. And I remember once we got everything relaxed and he got on the radio and started getting some better directions to the hospital than I can give him because I couldn't really see shit. I started running myself through like a checklist in the back seat. One, I wanted to like assess the situation. So I started like just calming myself down a little bit and started thinking to myself, all right, dude, like what just happened? Like, let's slow it down. What just happened? So I started walking myself through it like, all right, you've been shot. Okay, now where have I been shot? I got one in the hand, I got one in the face, and I got one in my right leg. That's all I knew. I didn't know about any of the other gunshot wounds. So I wanted to start fixing what I can fix. Well, the problem was I couldn't fix anything because both my hands didn't work. I couldn't move one single fucking finger and nothing. It was just like they were paralyzed. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not fixing the tourniquet. I'm not taking this fucking vest off. I can't check for other wounds, like kind of screwed. But I knew I was losing a shit ton of blood. And I knew the way I could help slow that down was to slow my breathing with some combat breathing, slow breaths in, slow breaths out. And for me, it wasn't hard because I've been an athlete. I run marathons, I do Ironmans, CrossFit, I work out all the time. So working on breathing patterns and stuff is something I actually did all the time. So I just started doing that like I was running or I was at the gym. I started working on my breathing, and slow that heart rate down. And once I did that, I started jumping ahead further. I wanted to keep looking for work, just like in the parking lot. When I was lying there exposed, like I had to do something, I had to look for work. So I crawled, right? Same thing in the back seat. I'm not just going to lay there. I got to find something to do. I got to keep working. I got to work this problem. So I started jumping ahead to like, all right, what's going to happen next? We're going to get to the hospital. They're going to take me in. They're not going to know how to get all this gear off of me, all these cool buttons and snaps and shit that I have on, this tactical shit. And I'm going to have to tell them how to do it before they knock me out. And sure enough, I get there, I had to tell them how to take all this shit off. Then I started screaming at them to knock me out. But I knew I had to keep working. Like when I woke up in the hospital, I knew my leg was bad. And I knew they were going to knock me out. So I knew that when I woke up, I did not want to be surprised that my leg wasn't there. So in the backseat of that car on the way to the hospital, I had already convinced myself that leg was gone. They were just going to take the leg. It couldn't be fixed. Couldn't save it. It's gone. And I was fine with it. I was going to survive. I was going to be an amputee, and I'm still going to have an awesome fucking life because people do it every day. I can do it too, and it didn't bother. The goal was I wanted to wake up and look down and be surprised that it was still there. That was my goal. So I started convincing myself of that. And we finally get to the hospital. Josh pulls up to the ER doors with the car. He puts it in park. And as soon as he puts it in park, the engine dies. Come to find out, when Josh got out of his car and came and unholstered and came up on target, his first round actually went down into the engine block and stuck in the engine block. And the car actually stayed alive until it pulled up to the ER door and he put it in park. How fucking crazy is that?
That it's insane, and that was insane in the book. I want to ask you one thing about, because you mentioned thinking about your family and stuff.
Yeah.
When this is all over and you're driving there and you're giving yourself all these jobs to do, does the suspect ever come into your mind? Do you ever think, man, fuck that guy?
In that moment in the car?
Yeah.
No, I wasn't thinking about him at all.
It never comes up in your mind. Like, you never think about, not necessarily what happened, but I know you thought about your wife, you thought about your child. That was the thing that kept popping up in my mind, that you're talking about this. You're trying to find all these jobs to do. Are you trying to not think about that, or is it still creeping in?
No, I mean, I think it was in my mind, but I wasn't letting it get to me. I was focused on, I'm mission based, and now my mission was to get the fuck home. So my mission at this time was, I was concentrated on my wife and my son, and whatever I had to do to get home to them, that's what I was focused on, like controlling my breathing, checking for wounds, thinking ahead 2 steps. That's what I was focused on. He was in my mind, obviously, because it would have just happened, but.
Well, the reason I ask is because you're so strong about mission and about not letting people tell you what's going to happen.
Right.
That's what came up in my mind when I'm reading it, that you're just thinking, man, fuck that guy. He's not going to win. And I just...
Hey, later.
Okay, so not in the car ride, but it did come into play later, because that's what I was thinking about while I was reading was, I got to think that he's doing that over and over in his head just to kind of keep that body rolling forward.
Yeah.
Thinking of a goal, not to let that guy win.
Yeah, that came into play later. And honestly, man, like, and I still think about that guy. In that way, like when I'm doing something hard, if I'm doing something physically hard or whatever, especially, if I'm feeling like, man, I'm fucking getting worn out here, I'm tired, like where I'm on stage speaking and things are getting overwhelming, I always think of him and I say, you're not going to fucking beat me. You haven't beat me yet, and it's not going to start today. Like that comes to my mind quite a bit when I do hard things. Yeah. I would say that came into play. That started when I was in rehab, probably.
So let me ask you a question, and I want you to think about it for a second. Do you think that's healthy?
For me, I think to each their own. I think everyone deals with things differently. For me, yeah, I think it's healthy because that's just how I process it. Especially when I was rehabbing, when I got home from rehab and I was rehabbing on outpatient and on my own at home, in those early days, I remember going for runs and just being in pain and pushing myself through it to the point where I was crying while I was running. And I remember screaming out loud, like, fuck you. Like, you're not going to win today. And for me, yeah, I feel like for me, it was healthy. That's how I dealt with it because I felt better afterwards. I feel like keeping that shit in there, it just festers and it builds. And I think, verbally saying it actually literally gets it out. If that makes sense.
But no, I think it makes it real.
Yeah.
If you're talking to it, even though he's not there, it still makes it a very real emotion instead of just thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's healthy. I'm not going to say it's healthy for everyone because I think everyone's got their own way of processing shit. It works for me.
Well, and that's why I wanted to ask, because as I'm reading, like I said, I'm like, he's got to say that 100 times a day to this guy in the beginning.
Oh,
yeah. I do want to add something in. So as you go to the hospital, as you're in rehab, there's other stuff that's going on that I know you're not really focused on at that moment. You will become entrenched in it later, but immediately investigations are going in. They're taking away guns, badges, putting people under investigation.
Yeah.
In all ways that you look at this, you guys did the right thing. You were getting a bad guy off the street. You did get a bad guy off the street. Unfortunately, what happened to you, But this has got to play into it. You're fighting for your life. You're fighting to get back to your family to make this right. And you're under a spotlight. So you're fighting on two different fronts. You're already mentally exhausted. You're already physically exhausted. How do you fight on two different fronts?
So I would say I was in the hospital after a couple of days, and I remember, Josh and George had to deal with their own thing that night. Like they got their badge and stuff taken that night and notified that they were on, administrative leave, paid administrative leave, pending, homicide investigation, because now the three of us are homicide suspects, right? Now there's been a murder, so to speak, as far as the report goes. So they're dealing with it on their front. And then I remember I'm in the hospital on like day 3 or 4, maybe. The Delaware State Police homicide investigators that were running it, came up to see me, and they were cool. Like, there was no problems with it. They came in and said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. This is who we are. This is what we're going to be doing. We're not here for any of that. We don't even want you to want to talk about it right now. We just want to check on you, see how you're doing, and let you know, like, when you're ready. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be next month. It can be 6 months. It's whenever you're ready. You come to us, and we'll do what we have to do with the investigation part on your end. But it's when you're ready. We're not going to force you into it anytime soon." Which was awesome, because they had to do that. They have to make contact with you, and they did it the best way they could. And I remember when I got home from the hospital, to jump forward, as soon as I got home, I called them. I was like, "Let's just do this shit and get it done with." And I did it probably like 2 weeks after I was home, maybe.
Well, which is, here's looking at it from the law enforcement perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're telling you if you want to do it in 6 months. No one wants to wait 6 months for an investigation. No one wants that hanging over their head. The badge and gun are already turned in. You're not speeding it up.
Yeah.
So you want to get it done as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Do you think at the moment, though, that you called them after you're back home, that's got to be what? How many months are we into it now?
When I called them, it was probably 8 weeks till I called them.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, probably 2 months. Yeah.
Do you think, looking back on it now, you're in the right head state to do that? Because I know exactly, like I just said, people are like, "Oh, I want to get this done. I want to get it over." But if we look back on it now, are you in the right headspace to do that?
I think, at that point, I don't think you're really in the headspace to do anything. Because, it's still fresh, obviously. You're still processing shit that, I was still thinking of shit that, like, oh shit, I forgot about that. Or you're still remembering stuff, But it's like, you have a lawyer with you, obviously. So when I went in for my interview with homicide, I have my lawyer with me. They're reading you your Miranda rights. It's just like you're a suspect. So you get treated like a suspect, They weren't unfair. I don't want to downplay, the detectives or the agencies. They were phenomenal with me. They just had to do their job as part of the job. But no, I don't think anybody's ever really ready for it, man. It's a tough thing to sit there as a cop on the other end of that table and be read Miranda and questioned on a guy that you just killed because he tried to kill you, Yeah, it was tough. That was tough. It was a very emotional situation.
And when you look at it, are you of the mind state like you're really starting to question, is it worth it? Like, you were doing this to take this guy off the streets, to take someone bad away from society.
Yeah.
And now you're explaining your actions for him trying to kill you.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that, like, why the fuck do I have to go through this? I just did my job. I did what I had to do. But you also know, like, it's an unfortunate part of the job. Like, it has to be done, So and the thing was, like, this is, December of 2020 was the shooting. So what was going on that year? COVID, but what else? All the anti-police riots, right? All that shit was fresh, man. So when this first happened, especially our families, like my wife, she was like, what the hell is going to happen here? Like, I remember we had police stationed at my house. I lived with my in-laws at the time. And I remember we had my agency had officers stationed at our house overnight for the first few days for security because we didn't know what was going to happen. Luckily, we didn't have any problems. Actually, we actually had a lot of support from the community that we're in with this incident, which was really amazing and unexpected. But we didn't know what to expect with it because, especially in that year, it was just a really, really bad year for law enforcement in general.
Yeah. And, not only that, it's going through this rehabilitation. It's bad on the outside. It's bad on the inside. You as a person can't physically do anything because of your hands, because of your leg, what's going on. And mentally, you can't really do anything because, like we just talked about, you're not in the right headspace to tell people about this, to get your side of the story out at the time. And it's got to be frustrating. The big part that I want to point out about physical therapy that you had when you're in this inpatient therapy, you think everything's going well. Christmas Eve, you go to see the doctor. You think he's going to tell you, man, you're doing amazing. You'll be walking in 2 weeks and you'll be home and all that kind of stuff. Of course, that's your positive thinking in the one. But he gives you a real gut punch and tries to explain this to you.
Yeah.
When you hear that and you've fought through this and you thought you're on the mend and you've turned kind of things around, how much does that kick you in the chest knowing, man, he's telling me I'm completely wrong in what I'm thinking?
Yeah, I all but gave up Christmas Eve. I was done. My wife was there. She wasn't at the doctor's appointment, but she was waiting for me back at the hospital, at my rehab hospital. And I remember getting back and seeing her, and I told her what the doctor said, that things are not going to be the same for me the rest of my life. My hands are fucking trashed, and I won't be able. They're not going to have much ability in them, and just terrible situation. And I remember being mad and upset, and this is Christmas Eve, and she's got to hear all this too, so it was really odd. I remember telling her to just leave on Christmas Eve. I said, you need to just leave, just go home, leave me, and go home to our son and have Christmas. I'm done, just go home. And I remember she cried and I cried. And when she left, I remember we both, later talking about it, we both felt like it was like leaving in the middle of a fight, but we weren't fighting. Yeah, we were mad at the situation. Her and I didn't fight at all. We didn't have like a disagreement about anything. I was defeated. And like I said, I all but gave up. I just thought, I'm sitting here fighting for all this shit, and the doctor's telling me pretty much I'm fucked. It doesn't matter. And it topped it off. It was Christmas Eve, and I hadn't seen my son. I've seen him once since the situation, and now we're, 2 weeks post shooting. I've seen my son one time.
Does ending it, anything creep into your head?
Ending it?
Yeah.
As far as like suicide, you mean?
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking suicide. So you can't control what pops in your head. You can only control
Of course.
you can only control like how you process what comes in your head, how quick you allow it to stay there. So just
100%.
the suicide pop in my head, yeah. But I chose not to let it fester with that. And that was the main reason. Was I had dealt with that already with my friend and my ship partner that had killed himself, and I saw what that did to his family, his wife, his kid, his parents. And I remember how I felt when he did it. I hated him. When he did that, I wasn't sad for years. I was fucking pissed. Like to the point where like I wanted him to come back just so I could beat the shit out of him. And if it wasn't for dealing with that, I don't know. You never know. Maybe things might have been different in my head. But I remember being determined to not do that to my family. And I just never allowed that thought to sit there and fester on me.
Well, and the reason I asked that question was I wanted to ask that specifically because of him and because of what you just said. It's the way that you handle it. It's the way you push it out.
Right.
When you have that thought come into your head, the only thing I can think of you thinking was, you're a fucking coward for thinking that.
Yeah.
Because of how you spoke about the one before. Is that what happens with you? And that's what, that's not what turned you around. There was something else that turned you around, but is that what kind of gets you out of that thought?
Yeah, I was again talking to myself out loud, like, you're a coward. Don't be a bitch. You can get through this. And if you can't get through it and your life is shitty, it doesn't matter. We're not doing that to them. I'm not going to abandon my family that way. We'll make it work somehow. That was my thought process. It was not an option. I did not want my son to grow up knowing that I had done that to myself. There was going to be a way around this somehow. Yeah.
Well, you come out of it, and you come out of it that night. So let's talk about what happens that night, on to Christmas, and then I want to move forward into rehab when you're out of the hospital, because I think that's where your life really starts to take a change.
Yeah. So that night my wife left. It's Christmas Eve, and I was just, like I said, man, I was defeated. Like, I was just grasping at straws, anything I could for some motivation, fucking YouTube videos, whatever I could find for some fucking motivation. And one guy I followed at the time, I really admired, was obviously David Goggins, and just that mindset. Like, I appreciate that mindset that people have. And I remember finding like an email address for him, like on his website. I just sent an email, like when I opened a prayer. I was like, I'm going to email this guy and just tell him who I am and what happened and what I'm dealing with right now. And, I probably won't hear anything bad, but whatever. At least I can just get it off my chest and put it on black and white. You know what I mean? So at the time I couldn't type anything, so I had to do everything talk to text. So the email was probably all fucked up. If I look it back, it was probably like all jacked up. He probably thought I was drunk or something. I just misspelled words and shit probably. But I never thought of that till now. I have to go back and look at the email. I think it's probably my soapbox. I'll do that tonight. But I sent this email and went to bed. And then I woke up in the morning and I didn't turn my phone off at night, but like I turned the ringer off, you know what I mean? So I could sleep, whatever. Right. So I woke up and I had a missed call and a voicemail, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then like I'm on my phone, looked at my email, and I had an email response from Goggins. And it said, it just simply said, check your voicemail, motherfucker. And I was like, what? And I grabbed my phone and played the voicemail, and sure as shit, David Goggins called me on Christmas Eve about 10:30 at night. They left me a voicemail. I put my phone number in my email, which I don't know why. It's because I just like, Goggins, I would have called me. Sure as shit he did.
On Christmas Eve with a drunk email that you sent me.
Fucking called me on Christmas Eve, man, and left me a voicemail. And
well, if you don't mind, I'll when I do the edit, I'm gonna play
you could play it on here, sure.
The voice message.
It's awesome, man. And I just remember one specific thing he said, which was, continue showing the world what is possible. And that fucking stuck with me. And I remember that morning, it was just like a light switch, man. It all just changed like that, like instantly. And I remember calling my wife that morning, Christmas morning. I called my wife, told her real quick, and then I did FaceTime, watched my son open up some presents. And then the hospital was, while I was in the ICU, I wasn't allowed to have visitors because of COVID. But I was allowed to have a cop with me every day, which was great. But in the rehab facility, I could have no visitors, but they were going to allow my wife up every day. So I was fortunate to have my wife every day. And then as a bonus on Christmas, last minute, they decided they would let my son come up. But I had to go see him in a different room downstairs because I didn't want people to see him and get mad that I was having visitors. So I got to see my son on Christmas for about an hour. And that was, it was just like a perfect day, man. Perfect as I could be for the situation, you know what I mean? The Goggins thing turned me around, and then, get to see my son that day. It was just a total fucking game changer for every man. And it really set the wheels back in motion.
Well, let's talk about going to rehab on the outside, because you get released not before you see a plastic surgeon the same day they release you, but you get released, you start a physical rehab. Sim is your physical therapist, which we'll get into them in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing that I want to talk about is what stuck out was you have to drive past the parking lot that you were shot in every time you go to physical therapy.
Yeah.
At any point, do you go, can I catch a break here?
Yeah. So I get home from physical therapy. I come home from physical therapy. I get sent home on a Wednesday. The next day I get home at night. The next day is New Year's Eve. So the next morning we wake up, it's New Year's Eve, and we call this rehab place to schedule therapy, get it going. And they were kind enough to take me in New Year's night to get started. So started New Year's Eve night. So my wife drove me, and on the way there, you have to drive by the hotel to get there. It's on the highway, so you have to go by. There's no way around it. It's impossible. So, like I said, it's 10 minutes from my house. So we drive by it the first time, and I knew that before we left the house. I was like, I'm going to drive by this place, you know? So sure enough, we get close, and I start having like a little panic attack. And we get by it, and I cool out, and we go physical therapy. And I just remember being like, dude, I can't do this every fucking day, dude. Like, I can't drive by this parking lot every day and have this parking lot whip my ass. Just can't. And I had to drive by it coming home, you know? So the next day we go to physical therapy, and you got to remember, like, this isn't just hard for me to drive by this place. This is hard for my wife to drive by this place, you know? But at the time, I'm not thinking about that. I'm focused on what the hell I'm dealing with, you know? So I remember as we get close, I was like, pull in the parking lot. She was like, where? I was like, the motel, pull in the parking lot. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, pull in the fucking park. So we pull in the parking lot, park for a minute, and I just sit there, and I tell her where to park, which was close to where it happened. And I just sit there for a minute and just in silence, and I just eat it. Cry a little bit, get mad, and I just sit there and chew on it for a while and just soak it in and just let it work itself through me. And the thought process was, you know, I didn't lose in that parking lot that night. And I sure as shit was not going to lose in my own home every day for the rest of my days going forward. And that included driving by that parking lot every day, because it's 10 minutes from my house. I wanted to face that head on. I didn't want it to sit there and fester like everything else I had dealt with. I wanted to get to it head on. And I wanted to beat it and put it behind me. So I did. I did it that night, and I did it continuously, here and there going forward. I mean, hell, it's been December this year will be 4 years, and I was just in the parking lot a couple of days ago having a cup of coffee. It's just once in a while I'll get a little niche like, oh, you know what? I got some time to kill on my way to this meeting or whatever. I'm going to pull in here and have some coffee or whatever and just reminisce. Or usually I'll sit there and think about where I've come since I was lying in that parking lot. You know what I mean? And that works for me. I don't go there to sulk or anything. I go there in the mindset of victory, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
The way I look at it is I own the parking lot. That's the way I look at it. The parking lot's not going to own me. I own it.
Well, let's talk about your physical therapist, because I think that was the person, other than your wife and your family, of course, that really saw how important it was for you to get to where you wanted to be. Because I think everyone else that worked with you, not saying they weren't good staff, not saying that they didn't take care of you, but I don't think that they mentally understood where you wanted to be. And I'm not even talking about physically. Of course, you wanted to run the half marathons, but I think your physical therapist understood where you wanted to be that would cleanse your mind and get you back in the game full time.
Yeah. So, day one with her, It was just like when I was at the inpatient, day one was, okay, this is what you're looking at. This is what the typical recovery would be. And this is our goal to get you here. And I did the same thing I did there. I said, okay, these are your goals. Well, these are my goals. Like you have a bar for me. Your bar is set here, but your bar will never be set as high as the bar I have for myself. It's just not going to happen. I will always expect more out of myself than someone else expects out of me. I always hold myself to a higher standard. And she didn't, smirk at it or sulk at it. She was like, okay, if that's what you want to do, we'll do it. And I think her thought process probably was like, we'll see if this guy actually wants to work this hard. You know what I mean? But she found out real quick that I did. And I think she realized real quick that I wasn't messing around. Like I had goals and I wanted to achieve them. And she did everything in her power to get me there. And she believed in me every step of the way. And that was, not that anyone else, not that the others didn't believe in me. But I had a lot more time with her. You know what I mean? And I could see it in her that she believed it. I could feel it with her. And, that paid off a lot. And the goals I had set, she helped me get there.
I got to ask a question, though, and this is another thing that stuck out in the book to me. This person, of all the people that you're working with, of medical staff that you're working with, is the first person that really believes you, says, all right, you want to do this? We're going to do it. I'll push you as hard as you want to be pushed. And yet you still did it your way and went home and did stuff you weren't supposed to do and did the physical therapy on your own. I've got to understand that mind state because you finally have a teammate, someone pushing you, doing exactly what you want them to do, and you're still telling them, I'm going to fucking do it my way. I've got to understand that mindset because let's say you hurt yourself doing that.
Yeah.
And then you get set back with them.
Yeah. Well, anything I did, I would always check and say, if I do this, is it going to hurt me more or is it just going to cause pain? If the answer was, if you do this, you're going to do damage, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be too stupid about it. But if it was like, no, you can do this, but you're probably not going to want to do it or do too much of it because it's going to fucking hurt a lot. But okay, well, then it's just pain. I could do it. Pain I wasn't worried about because I wasn't going to feel any worse pain than I had already felt. So for me, whatever pain was going to be thrown at me in recovery, I could care less. Like I'll eat that. I already ate everything else in that parking lot. Nothing's going to hurt more than that shit did. Trust me. So I just pushed myself to the limits with pain as far as I could. And if there was something where I couldn't do it because it would cause damage, then I would back down. I wouldn't be too insane about it. It's just, I would take the pain threshold to another level.
Well, that answer right there where you were like, yeah, I wouldn't take it too hard. Yeah. I still feel like you pushed it a little bit.
I probably
you rode that line.
I probably did. I know I scared my wife quite a bit through recovery. She would go on some runs with me once in a while. She'd have a little bit of a panic attack herself because I would just I'd probably overdo it a little bit, but yeah. That's just me, man.
I gotta ask you though, who are you trying to prove to? Yourself or the world? Because I feel like you don't really know in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't. I really didn't know at the moment. I just wanted to. I would say probably at the moment, if probably the world looking back because I just like, like I told you before, I like doing things my way. I don't like being told no and to be told like, you can't do this, you can't do that. Typical person can't cover this way. Piss me off. So I think I just had, a little chip on my shoulder where it was like, well, I'm going to show you otherwise. I think that was part of it. But as time goes on now, a lot of it is, I think now is, proving to myself still, like competing with myself, I think that's the way I I don't want to prove anything to the world right now, or I'm not trying to prove anything to the world right now. It's just trying to prove to myself that, when I have these things I want to do, that I can do them still.
But I think I would almost disagree with that answer too, because I think you are, not in a bad way, but I think you're trying to prove to all the people that you're giving these speeches that you're helping along on their journey, that
Yeah.
They need to prove to themselves. So I think you are still, but it's a very subconscious proving to the world.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. Yeah.
I do want to talk about something else, though, with your half marathons that you did. Now, this was the most amazing thing to me. Your first half marathon that you do after being shot 6 times, going through rehab, steel rod in your leg, all of these kind of things, you run an 8-minute, 8-second pace.
Mm-hmm. Fast and half marathon
50.
ran.
Yeah, I'm almost 50. I don't run an 8-minute, 8-second, and both my legs are, just one. So
Yeah.
I'm almost wondering if you were running on straight adrenaline at the time.
Yeah, I was, man. It was straight adrenaline, that first one. I was in a lot of pain in that race because so my training runs, I didn't run at that fast of a pace. It was much slower in my training runs. But when the gun went off, when we started, like, my adrenaline was pumping and I felt good. And I remember I got to like mile 7, I think it was. And like, I felt like I started to hit a wall and I was kind of like, oh shit. Like, I started out way too fast, man. And I started to hit that wall and my leg was like not feeling great. And then that's when I started thinking about him. You know what I mean? And that's when I started talking to people on the race bike. I thought I was a nut job because I was talking to myself out loud and I was like, dropping F-bombs like, F you, you're not going to win. And they're probably thinking this guy's an asshole, But I was, man, I was talking to him.
Well, I think you even did that as you were passing people, didn't you?
Yeah. I was passing people talking about you're not going to beat me, but I wasn't talking to them. I was talking to him. That's why people thought I was a giant ass. But yeah, they don't, because they don't know, obviously,
Right.
But then I remember seeing the mile marker for mile 13. I was like, this is it, one more fucking mile. And I remember I started to cry because, just the emotional part of it. And then I started getting pissed off because the crying was slowing me down. And I knew I had a really good time going. I had to put the crying to the side and finish. I didn't know how good my time was going to be, but I could just tell like it was going to be on point. And then when I got across the finish line and everything, realized what I ran, I was like, oh shit, it's pretty good. My wife was kind of surprised too, so it was fun.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
And then you decided 2 weeks later you'd run another one.
I did, and I ran that one like a couple seconds faster, I think. Yeah.
Well, nothing like proving that you can do something.
Yeah, that's what it was, man. It's just, yeah, I mean, looking back, I wanted to make a statement. You know what I mean? I wanted to make a statement.
Well, you made a hell of one.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something else, though, that I think was the most impactful. I think the half marathon was the most impactful for you. I think the most impactful thing you did for the greater good, though, was that you found out during this whole thing about retiring injured in the line of duty officers, the difference in pay, how they could be penalized for if they made money after that. And you went to change that. You had no public speaking on your record. You had nothing about government, how to approach Congress, the Senate, anything like that. And you went, it's bigger than me now. And that's why I say I think the half marathons were for you. And then you realize it's bigger than me now. We've got to keep going forward. Let's talk about that bill and how it changed and what you saw wrong with it.
Yeah, so probably about a year before I retired, I kind of knew where it was going. I kind of thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back or not, just because my hands got better, a lot better than they expected, but I still had some issues with them. So I was like, well, just in case, I'm going to start looking at the state's disability pension for law enforcement, just so I know what I'm looking at here in case it goes that route. So I started looking into it and found that if you retire on medical disability and you can get another job, they penalize you for how much you make. So if let's say your medical pension is $50,000. Let's just say you get $50,000 in medical pension. I just make up a number to make it easy. And then you go get it
because it was half of what you make, correct?
Yeah, yes. Well, some of it, you get anywhere from 50 to 75%, depending on what you get.
Okay.
So let's just say you get 50%, and let's just say you get 50 grand a year in your pension. Your pension's only 50 grand, okay? And then you go get another job, and your job is you get a job where your salary is like 70, okay? They're going to penalize you $1 for every $2 you make over that 50 grand. So and by doing that, they're going to take it out of your disability pension the following year. So you're being penalized for making a good life for yourself. So you get injured in the line of duty, you retire, you get your medical pension, but you can only make so much money. And if you do make more than you're supposed to, they're going to penalize you. Whereas if you just retire after a normal 20-year career, there's no penalty. You're going to get your pension, you go do whatever the hell you want. So why am I going to be penalized just because I got shot? Doesn't make any sense, right? And I remember thinking, like, this is really messed up. Like, all these guys have retired for all these years. Like, this thing was signed into law back in, like, 1980. I'm like, all these guys have retired on a number of disability issues, and no one's thought to say something about this. I just thought it was madness. So Mike, who was the fourth partner in my team, who wasn't there, his wife is a lobbyist, and they're really good friends of ours. And Kim is one of my wife's best friends. So I was telling her about it, and she was like, "Well, let's do something about it. Let's see if we can make a change." So she's made some calls to some local politicians, and wheels got moving, and we rewrote the bill, had it taken out, and then took it to the Delaware Senate and the Congress and presented it, and it ended up passing. So we ended up changing it that following year, probably about 6 months before I retired, and actually helped out a bunch of guys that were actually going through the medical process to retire too. So it was a big step in our state for disability pensions.
Well, and if you think about it, you're talking about helping the guys that were going through it at that time. Yeah. Think about all those guys when it was signed in the 80s.
Yeah.
They're retiring at 50, 60, 55, 60 years old.
Yeah.
Those guys are going to be on the way out, and they are going to have been screwed their whole pension time.
Whole time. Yeah, it's terrible.
Now, the big thing with this, though, was what I wanted to ask you was, because you took the floor in both. You took it in the Senate and the House to get the bill passed. Let's say you're not injured the way you were. Let's say your story's not as dramatic. I want your honest opinion. Does this bill get changed?
That's tough. I don't know, because I want to say yes, because, you want to say yes, right? But, emotion drives things. And that was an emotional thing. I would hope it would, but to be honest with you, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't, to be honest with you. It might not. If I was pushing a car off the side of the road and threw my back out, they might say tough shit. Like, this is what it is. We're not changing that. But because of what happened, I got shot 6 times, and it's emotional. My wife's there, my son's there. Let's change it, right?
And once again, we go back to that thing. Does everything happen for a reason? You weren't even supposed to be there that night. You were supposed to be at drinks with a friend. Yeah. Like, is this the grand scheme of what everything is supposed to happen? And that's what I found the most interesting throughout your whole story, is these puzzle pieces just seem to fall in place as you're moving along.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was the biggest thing that you did, was change this for people that either didn't want to get up in front and talk, didn't want to take the lead, or it was just too much of a hassle. Because we both know cops, when they retire, they just want to be left alone. They want to do their thing, and they didn't have that voice for them. So to me, this was the most amazing thing that you did. Through all these other amazing physical things that you did, this to me was the greatest thing that stood out to me.
I appreciate that, because that was it meant a lot to me to get that done, because I know it helped out a lot of guys. So yeah, thanks for saying that. It means a lot. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing to me. All right, I want to talk about retirement and everything that we're talking about. You get this passed, you retire. You've wanted to be a cop. You've been a cop 19 years. You've lost friends. You've lost your canine partner. You've lost pieces of you. You've been injured. It's all over. And you can get to that point where you're like, and I know you were thinking it, all right, it's time to retire. It's time to step down. I can't be as good as I used to be. It's time to step away. But I got to understand the fear that's coming behind it, because you've never done anything else. And you're going to step away after this life that you've lived, and there's no more mission. There's no more fugitives. There's no more goals to push yourself through, at least that you can see short-sightedly. You got to walk me through, because I have a feeling that you were scared to death to step away.
Yeah, that was hard, man. Like I said, I kind of knew it was coming. I went to my last doctor's appointment with my surgeon, and he was like, I want to know what you think. And I said, well, I want to go back to work, but, I know my hands are pretty bad, and I know I'm not going to be able to operate at the same level that I once did. I remember him saying, well, I'm glad you said that, because I was not going to sign off on you going back, so I was hoping you were going to agree with me. So that started the pension, or my retirement process. And even though I kind of expected it to go that way, it was still like, oh shit, like what now? You know what I mean? And it was scary, man. It was like, you feel like you just lost who you were. You know what I mean? Because you're a cop. What do? You're a cop. I'm a cop. That's what I do. And I've been a cop since the time I went to the academy right when I turned 21. And at that time I was 41. And I was scared to death. I was like, how am I going to, because at the time you don't know what your pension is until after you file for it. And then a couple months goes by, and then you find out what your pension is going to be. I had no idea what it was going to be yet, because I had to go through approval process of what percentage you're going to get, and all this other stuff. So I didn't even know what I was looking at financially. And I had no other grant schemes of what I wanted to do, no other trades. Very scary moment to figure out what you want to do the rest of your life when you're not expecting it. So, I took some time to just work on some public speaking, and I started doing that. Started the nonprofit with my wife, which, financially doesn't help us, because I don't take a salary from the nonprofit. It's 100%.
And it's not free to do a nonprofit.
It's not free to do it, and I don't take a salary, so that doesn't help me at all. And then I started looking at other things, and started getting into coaching, online coaching, like nutrition, fitness, mindset. I started getting into that. And that was something I got into because I had a coach of my own. And I kind of fell in love with the whole process of kind of like getting myself into a rut, and then finding a way to get myself back on track with forming, a set of daily disciplines. So living your life a certain way. And the process of learning to do that myself through my coach kind of made me think, I could do this. Like, maybe this is what I'm meant to do now. So I got into that, and that's been a lot of fun, man. That's been a lot of fun, helping people get their lives together and get back on track and do things they didn't think they could do. And I'm really enjoying the process of that. It's been really, really, really interesting.
I want to ask you one more personal question about the doctors and about leaving. I want you to go back to Christmas Eve when that doctor told you it's not going to be the same, and you took it really hard. And let's fast forward to the doctor at the end before you retire, and he tells you it's never going to be the same, probably not going to be able to do it. I wanted you to just say it. Emotional maturity has come a long ways in this short time since all this happened.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the difference in the feeling? When you looked at that one doctor, you were like, fuck this guy. When you're looking at this other guy, how does it happen differently? Because I know it had to have happened differently.
Yeah, it's different, but there's still that part of me. It's like, I'm going to show you otherwise. It's just in a more mature manner, I guess you could say. A little more grown up manner. Um,
Let me ask you this way. Were you as sad in both occasions?
was I sad?
No. Were you, because you were devastated on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Were you just as sad of someone telling you your career's over, or did you think, all right, I'll figure something out?
No. I wasn't just as sad, but I was sad because, like I said, I knew it was coming. So I wouldn't say I was prepared for it, but I knew that was coming. So I wasn't as sad as Christmas Eve. To be honest with you, I didn't think it was going to be as hard on me as it was, though. Like, I knew it was coming, and then the day that it actually came, I was like, oh, that feels real now. But the only thing that really got me through it was, throughout this whole 2-year process, when I got shot, my son was 7 years old. And from the time I came home until the day I retired, probably twice a week, the question was, do you know if you're going back to work? Do you know if you're going back to work? Because he didn't want me to go back. He wanted me to be done with police work. I can't blame him, right? So now I finally get to retire, and I come home and I tell him, like, hey, Dad's not going back to work. We're gonna find something else to do. And I see the smile on his face and the weight lift off of him made the process a little easier for me. Goal was to go back because that's what I do. My wife, obviously in a perfect world, she wouldn't have me go back, but in our conversations, she said it. She was like, this is who you are. This is who I married. And if you want to go back, you go back. Do I like it? No, but I'm going to support you because this is what you do. So I'm glad I didn't have a choice in the matter. It wasn't my choice. It was a doctor. The doctor was like, I don't really give a shit what you want. This is what this is what I'm going to do. I just want to know how you felt about it before I told you. It made it a little easier that I didn't have to make the decision. Because honestly, if I would have gone back, and I'm not saying it would have been hard, but it would have been hard. It would have been hard to do that to my family. Like, I'm going back. You know what I mean? Like,
because that decision is completely for you.
Yeah, I would have felt selfish going back, to be honest with you. And that's not how I felt anyway. Like, if the doctor said, oh yeah, you want to go back, I'll send you back, I would have felt selfish because I know I was going back now operating at the same level. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's one of the reasons I kind of told him, like, I don't think I can do it. But
okay, so before we promote the foundation, because that's the last thing I want to talk about. I want to end this entire conversation by saying, I want to talk about what you learned about your family, your friends, your teammates, and most of all, about yourself throughout this entire process.
Yeah. My family. My wife and I have always had a really great relationship. We've always had a great marriage. And my son and I, and the three of us, we've always had a great relationship. We've always had a great family, very loving family. But it's multiplied now. My wife, everything I went through, my wife went through. And she went through, if not more, And I remember the first time I saw her in the hospital when she came in to see me. I remember looking at her and saying, I'm sorry I failed you. That was the first thing I said to her when I saw her. But I remember her looking at me and said, you didn't fail me, and you never have, and you never will. And when she told me that, I didn't just know we were going to be okay. Like, I knew our lives were going to be better. Like, I knew that bond had just gotten stronger. And the one thing I've learned from that is the importance of having a strong family. Having a strong family can really get you through anything. And that's really, my wife is really the driving force. Her and my son are the driving force of what really pushed me to get back to where I wanted to be. and to do the things I do now. Teammates, that's a whole other side of family, man. That's a whole other side of family. Those guys that were with me that night, and Mike, who missed it, but who was on his way. Man, they are literally my brothers. I don't look at them any other way. When you go through a situation like that with other men, that is a bond that, man, I can't even describe to you, you know? It's powerful. Yeah, that's, I couldn't have done it without them either, you know? I mean, they saved my life, you know? Josh and George were there to save my life. Mike did his part with saving my life, helping me keep my life together throughout this whole process. That's a whole nother family. What was the third one? Now I'm thinking about myself. I tell you what I've learned about myself is, one, I've really learned how to slow things down and appreciate things a little more, process things a little better. Not allow myself to get worked up so much anymore. That's one thing is, I mean, I'm 42 years old, so I should be pretty mature anyway, but I feel like this whole incident really catapulted the level of maturity for myself. I think it made me a better friend. It made me a better father, a better husband. And I think I've really learned just how to be a better human being, man. You know, be a better human being than I was before. And that's really my ultimate mission. I just want to be a good human being. I want to be a good role model. And that's pretty much what I live for now. I just want to be a good role model for my son and do the best I can to raise him to be a respectful young man and treat others with as much love and care as we treat each other.
It's pretty interesting to hear you say that you just want to be a good man, show your son the right way. And that's kind of what you were doing the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, but it's weird the important things that fall into place once we figure out we could lose them. I think that's what happens with a lot of people is it's too late before they figure out that they could lose those things.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it worked out for you and you get a whole new chapter and a whole new lease on life after this.
Yeah. It's been, people ask me all the time, like, if you go back, would you change anything? Would you put the car in differently? And, no, I wouldn't, because one,
that's why I didn't ask, because I figured that was going to be your answer.
I think the number one, you can't, right? You can't go back and do that. So why bother yourself thinking about it? That's the way I think about things all the time. Like, when it's done, right? Move on. And the other is, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. Do I have everything figured out? No, hell no, I don't have everything figured out. I'm still working through everything, but I'm happy. My family's happy. We're all healthy, and I'm doing things I never thought I'd do, things I never even wanted to do, but now I am, and I love it. And, because I'm happy where I'm at, like, why would I go back? Why would I go change anything? Because everything that's happened to me throughout my entire career, but especially the last 4 years, especially that night, that's what landed me where I am right now. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you,
100%.
So.
All right, let's talk about the foundation, man, before we wrap all this up. And let's give people where they can figure it out and get a hold of you.
Yeah, the Fit for Duty Foundation. So a little over a year into my recovery, my wife and I started the Fit for Duty Foundation. And what we do is we try to sponsor law enforcement, and we try to promote physical and mental fitness for them. Being a cop, man, any first responder, but from a nonprofit, it's law enforcement. It's health is really important for us, right? So, and mental health is even more important. So we really press upon the importance of that with sponsoring police officers in a CrossFit or like a functional fitness style gym. And we do that by paying your first 3 months membership at the gym of your choosing, or we find one for you. And after that, we hope to have that gym keep you on at a reduced, more affordable rate to keep you in there so you can start that journey towards your fitness.
How can people get a hold of that, and how can people find that?
So it's fitfordutyfoundation.org, FIT, the number 4, foundation.org. You can find the nonprofit there. You can find me, thetjwebb.com, or on social media at thetjwebb, and you can contact me there about whether it's fit for duty, coaching, speaking, whatever it is. That's where you can find everything for it.
Well, I got to tell you, man, it's been an absolute honor that you came on here to talk and tell your story. It's an absolutely fantastic book, absolutely fantastic story, and I'm so honored that you came here to talk to me.
Guys, you know where you can find TJ. Let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you know you can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast, and you can find me on YouTube, where all these conversations, they're in video form. And, of course, the DTD Podcast. But your one-stop shop, DTDpodcast.net. It's going to be everything that you need. Audio, video, what's happening on the show, what's not happening on the show, what's coming up on the show. TJ is going to have his own page. It's going to have pictures of him. You're going to get to see a lot more and a different side of him. It's also going to have all of his links where you can pick up his book, where you can find out the coaching, and where you can deal with the foundation that we just talked about. So you need to make sure that you go there. DTDpodcast.net. It's your one-stop shop. Don't forget to do that. Also, don't forget to check in on the sponsors, the guys that make this show incredible. TridentCoffee.com and MaxBelts.com and HatchetBrewing.com. Now, everyone knows Trident Coffee makes the best cold brew in the world, and if you do DTD15, you get 15% off your order. Mac Belts, you know, is the toughest leather belts on earth. They're good for wearing on the range or wearing in your regular life. Hatchet Brewing is our newest sponsor, and go there to pick up their swag. They are really making a difference in the brewing industry. It's my buddy, Greg. We got a lot coming up in the future with this. More to come on that. Guys, make sure you check us out each week. Thank you so much. Check out our sponsors. Help keep this show. Be a friend. Tell a friend. Share, like, subscribe, all that other bullshit that you know you need to do. That's TJ. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.